Hey, everybody, welcome to, episode 6 of the Having Had podcast. No disclaimers today. I'm going to jump right in. My guest today, I have never met her face to face, other than in little squares on a computer screen. During COVID, we met in a recovery group of touring professionals. Although I don't have a long history or know her very well, I hope to get to know her better through this episode. I had 3 things in common with her: being in recovery, and she now works in the film business and has formerly worked in the music business. So it's like meeting somebody who speaks all the languages you speak, which is pretty neat to have that, that instant connection with someone. So my guest today is Juice. Is it Percy or Percy?
Just Percy. Percy.
Percy.
Yeah.
I tried to church it up.
I know. People do it all the time. They always try and church it up. That's all good.
Yeah. So, instantly hearing in that group as you shared over several meetings that you were talking about, being on a film set, and I knew you would only have been in that group because it was people that had toured in the music business. It was, specifically roadies, from the music business, crew members. Mm-hmm. And so I was instantly like, oh, I have a whole other thing that I understand because I was in that group talking a lot about film work, which, there was nobody else in there other than Juice. So anyway, it's pretty neat to have that much in common with you.
Yeah.
So I'll start off, real simple, like I do with anybody, just to get rolling. How did you grow up? Where did you grow up? Where are you from?
Oh, I live in Canada. I'm a Canadian. I grew up. I was born in Toronto, Ontario. Um, Dad was a musician. Mom was his groupie. They had a little fling. That's how my sister happened. And, a few years later, they got back together and had me, we kind of lived like an artist hippie lifestyle in Toronto. I was the only kid I knew growing up who was raised vegetarian, who was raised with like Buddhist ideals instead of Christian ideals. And then when I was about 10 years old, we moved to Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is a very conservative place to grow up when you are a practicing Zen, Buddhist, vegetarian, hippie kid. um, I remember being in junior high and like begging to go to catechism class so I could go with my friends. Um, and I just, in hindsight, that just seems so crazy to me now. Um, I honestly, I kind of hated the way I was brought up when I was in it. But in hindsight, there's some really cool things. There's really cool reasons that I am the way I am because of those ideals I was brought up with. Yeah, and then we were in Nova Scotia for about 5 years before my family, kind of like a band, kind of just broke up like a band breaks up, and everyone kind of went their separate ways. And my mom moved to BC to be with another guy that she knew from her past, and my sister was old enough to be, going to college, so she did her thing, and I worked all summer at a summer camp, saved up enough money for a plane ticket, and moved to BC, and basically got a place on my own at 15 in British Columbia, just a little north of Vancouver. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So school wise, were you a good kid up to that point? You didn't get in any trouble
Oh
or
yeah,
weren't
no,
too
I
far
was
off
like
track?
overachiever, like just got to keep myself busy. I've always had to keep myself busy with everything, just like busy with student council, wrestling team, audio video club, just like all of the things. Um, at school, I mean, there were days I would go to school at like 6 a.m. for wrestling practice and wouldn't come home till 11 p.m. because I'd have, video editing and then, student council and then all this other stuff. So I kept myself really busy during school days and then was like organizing punk rock shows at the local venue in Halifax, on weekends and and taking the bus an hour into town so that we could, go to an all ages show at, the little hut next to the public pool. That's where they would hold the all ages shows, in the little like change room house next to the public pool downtown Halifax at the Citadel. So yeah, like very busy, and I mean, I graduated pretty much like at 50 when I moved. I graduated, so I was 15 when I graduated, and
Wow.
I think I did a year of upgrades, getting a couple science classes or whatever in BC, but not even a full semester, like a full year, just like a semester, and then pretty much, I mean, I was a good kid up until that point, and then at 15, you just sort of start to, live as an adult. And to be fair, like there was a lot of me that was living as an adult already, because my family we were not a wealthy family. We had a lot of stuff. We had to like we were cobbling it together every day just to get by, and my dad's always kind of been sick, so somebody kind of had to take care of him, and my older sister not really capable at the time, and it was just me because my mom was working. So being a latchkey kid, first one home, take care of dad for a bit, and yeah, so like you kind of grow up really fast. 15 sounds really young, but in my head, I thought I was 25, you know.
Yeah. As far as you were talking about doing the punk rock shows, what was your kind of hook into music? Like, when did that start? What got your attention and pulled you in that direction?
Well, I mean, being the child of a musician and his groupie, like my dad, sorry, mom, calling you a groupie, but I mean, she had a pin that said I'm with the band that she put on me when I was born. Like, um, I mean, music was always around us, like always around us. We had, my parents had that Columbia House subscription, and they actually used it. They got like 100 CDs for, 10 cents a CD or whatever, but they actually used it. We had like shelves and shelves of CDs, and every day, we wake up on a weekend and it's like we get to choose. Okay, yeah, Juice gets to choose what CD we put on in the morning, and so like it'd be anything from Mary Chapin Carpenter to Peter Gabriel to like crazy jazz to Tibetan throat singers. There was music like every genre. And if you look at my iPod right now, it's kind of the same. It's everything. It's Bob Dylan, and it's like, Americana, it's punk rock, it's metal, it's jazz, it's everything. So, and my dad being a musician kind of was just, that was the hook. I was, I remember sitting in his basement playing keyboards, just making up songs on my own, and my dad, got me involved in being in choirs and singing and all this stuff when I was younger. So I always thought I was going to be the one on stage, not the one backstage. And
We all do.
yeah, we all do. We all do. We all thought we were going to be on stage, and that's fine. Like, I mean, I still sing. I just, I never really got it together to get, a group together or get like, I think I've had a couple little folk duos here and there, but nothing really that I was able to commit a whole bunch of time to. And also, when you're trying to get by and survive and make money, like you can't put aside the time to make it in the music industry, because you got to make money. And trying to make it in the music industry, you don't make money until very, very far along, and only if you're lucky, or Taylor Swift.
Well, so much of it's circumstantial. I like to blame my lack of rock starness, achieving that status, on where I was geographically and what was available, or the other people that were available that were into the same thing I was. I always seemed to be one of the only ones, into the very specific, subgenres that I wanted to do or whatever. So that's my excuse, or my story that I stick to. So was there one band or one performance or a song you heard that pulled you towards punk rock?
I mean, this is very baby. there was like local bands. There was a lot of local bands, and there was a local band that I wouldn't call it punk rock. I mean, they were baby punk rock. They were called Monine, and they were from Ontario. And I
Yeah.
remember like loving this band, and like even like trying to sneak away on a tour with them and over March break when I was like 15 years old, just like hop in the van and try and get with them. But you know, I think I have always I've always loved like the classic, like I've loved the Slits, all girl punk band. I've loved the Cramps, like all those the Ramones, like those bands, like really, they got stuck in your head and they made you feel, and their songs were universal, like it's those guys were just basically that's like where I started. It's where I grew up. Like, the Slits, the Cramps, you know, the Ramones, yeah. Like I never really liked the Sex Pistols, even though everybody was like the Sex Pistols, and now I'm actually really glad that that wasn't my jam. I met Johnny Rotten once, and I wanted to punch him in the face. So, you
Yeah.
know, but yeah, just like for me, punk rock wise, it was all those guys, just the usual classics that just. But this, I mean, I guess the Slits are a little obscure. Not a whole lot of people know about them,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
So you moved when you were 15. You moved out to Vancouver. What did you do for work initially? I mean, at that age.
I had a really good fake ID.
There you go.
Actually, it was a terrible fake ID, but the security features weren't that good yet.
It was
On
good
our,
enough.
yeah, I'm pretty sure she was like South Asian, and with dark hair, but the photo was in black and white, and like, you know what did I do? I mean, I worked as a waitress hostess, but it was actually like a bartender at a local pub. I worked at a clothing store. I just got whatever jobs I could, to get by. And yeah, like a jean store, a clothing store. I moved in with a guy who owned a sex store. He owned like a romance store, so I would work part time there. I would, mix drinks at people's poker games for money. I would, did a little go-go dancing here and there for that same roommate. Like, in a very like, I was living like about 45 minutes north of Vancouver in a town called Squamish, BC. So it's halfway between Vancouver and Whistler. And so it was like at that time it was before the Olympics and it was very like safe and small and sleepy. So, I just was doing odd jobs and, retail and whatever I could, just scrambling.
So where did what came first? Did you do film first, or did you do rock and roll first?
Uh Officially getting paid, I did film first. I mean, I had jumped
Early
at
on, like at what age?
17. Yeah, I was 17 my first day on a film set. I was working retail in that town in Squamish, and a location manager came in to paper the neighborhood. And I don't know where the words came from or how I knew what to say, but I said, "Hey, do you need any local hires?" And he said, "Yes, give me your phone number." And I did. And I was hired as a PA on the rainiest 2 weeks that they had had on record in like 15 years. And I didn't have any rain gear, and I'm standing, but I got like 4 days of work, and I was bitten. I was like, yeah, I want more. They feed you stand out in the rain, you watch a generator, and like they feed you food and you get paid. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Little did I know.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that was that was what started it. I remember the location manager's name. I remember the show. I remember like the actors in it. Like, and I remember immediately being like, I need to go to Vancouver and do this. Um, and I actually ended up going to Vancouver and going to acting school instead. Did like 8 months of acting school. The day after I graduated, got a job as a PA on a film set. And I mean, that the rest is history as far as that goes. I just worked my way up. It was very interspersed with gig work, doing house gigs with sound guys here and there, because at the time we were having tax credit cuts and there was a big, push to save BC film. And there was always, we were always trying to, it wasn't steady work. It never is steady work, but
Yeah.
it wasn't something I could do steadily without having a side hustle. And the side hustle was humping speakers and bass cabs up 4 flights of stairs because I was 18 and thought I was tough as fucking shit, and just like, yeah, I could do this, and just trying to like haul a full fridge bass cab up 2 flights of stairs at the railway club because, I had to
Yeah.
prove myself. So, yeah. So film and music kind of dovetailed, but like technically, officially, film was first.
So, department wise, the first go was in locations, and then from there you were just doing set PA,
Yeah, I
or
was in Vancouver. Locations is set PA. Like, so the locations department
gotcha.
is part of the Directors Guild, and
Oh,
so yeah, and so we do things a little differently up here. But yeah, I started off watching a generator, and then started, suddenly I was doing lockups on the street, a little bit closer to set where I could actually hear the radio, and then suddenly I was, the on-set PA, making sure things were happening, and then, some years went by. I mean, I PA'd for a long time. I was young. I was kind of stupid. I was very entitled. Those are all things that don't always get you. And I was female. So those things don't always get you, like, moved up as quickly. Eventually, I was asked to become a trainee AD, which is different than a DGA trainee that you guys have, but it's the first step to being an AD. You're basically the ADPA, and you're in the AD department. So I became an assistant director that way. So, I mean, I dabbled in gripping, I dabbled in electrics. I I pulled focus on camera for a couple indies. Anything I could get my hands on, really, to try and not be changing garbages and watching generators.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and all of the work you do in any other department makes you a better AD ultimately, having
yeah.
an understanding of
Oh,
what each department is faced with each day.
it's essential, I think, in order to be a good AD or be a good producer, or production manager, which is what I'm aspiring to be. Like, you need to understand all that stuff. And like, I mean, I work the sound department. I did 2 shows as a sound assistant in the sound department, and as an AD, that actually really helps me. Like, I have, boom operators who trust me to take wires off of actors for them. And like, if they're
Okay.
in a pinch, when we have a 20 actor day and they're like, hey, do you mind grabbing that wire for me?
Yeah.
Like, and I understand how much time it takes for them to actually wire an actor and how much time it doesn't take when they're, shit in the bed and it's like, it's been a 10-minute wire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we go any farther, like chronologically, as far as any drinking or drug use, had that already become a part of daily life at this point? Did that start early? For me, from the earliest thoughts that I remember, my earliest core memories, I just always felt like I was a little bit out of sorts, my whole life. And just like I didn't get, the last page of the instructions, or I was just a little bit off, and I was always a little bit uncomfortable, and that's the best way I know to describe it. Just like I didn't quite fit. So it took until an age where I had access and whatever justification to pick up and use for the first time. But I really think I was wired wrong from the beginning. But was that the truth for you, or did it? Was there a certain point that you remember being attracted to that, and what was it like early in your life?
My parents were always what I would say were like controlled drinkers. Like, there was always alcohol in the house and they would let us have like a little sip here and there. I made beer with my dad in the basement, and he would let me drink the foam off the beer when I was a kid, and I used to love it. And I didn't really associate that with the feeling that I got when I did start drinking. But I always felt like everyone else was a part of a secret club that I wasn't invited to from a very early age. It was always like, you guys have something that I'm not allowed to have, and that gives you privilege that I will never, you get to feel like you belong, and I am always on the outside. I always felt just on the edge of the inner circle or even on the outer circle. I just was not even in a circle. I was in some, octagon, some other part of the whole field that everyone else, it just didn't feel like I had even a way to get into where everyone else was. And, um, and alcohol was the thing that actually really helped me feel like none of that mattered. And, you know, it was a thing that brought us all together. It kind of evened the playing field, at first, at first.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, basically at 15, when I was out on my own, I was, you know, I had some drinks at a field party, like in Nova Scotia, or at near graduation or something. Like, we'd gotten pretty drunk. I think it was at my sister's graduation party. Like, I'd gotten to go because I was always friends with her friends. And I got pretty drunk, and I was really proud of how much I was able to drink without throwing up. And it's a disgusting amount. I still remember some of the things I drank. And but then I was like, you know what? I don't really need this. I don't need to drink alcohol. I'm not, it's just one and done. It's fine. And then at 15, when I moved out on my own, it was just kind of everywhere, and it was like easily accessible, even for a 15-year-old. And I kept telling myself, you know what? I'm just doing what people do when they're in their 18, 19, 20s. I'm just getting it over with now, early, so that when at the time I'm 18, 19, 20, I'm like ahead of the game. But it didn't really, really ramp up until, my late 20s is when it was kind of constant. It was always like, hey, when can we have a drink? Let's always have a drink. Drinks were always there. It
Yeah.
was still fun times. It was still the fun. The problems hadn't really started yet. So it was still fun. And then 20s was, fun with problems. And then late 20s, early 30s was just problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as far as your progression in the film business, where did the tours come in? When did you do your first tour? Like, how did
Um,
that come about?
well, I was working as a PA, and then I would do Friday nights at a venue, humping gear for this guy. Basically, one night I went into a club that my stepbrother was working at, and I talked to a guy, this lighting guy. We call him Holy Fuck Chuck. Just this, big behemoth of a man. And holy fuck is every second word out of his mouth is holy fuck. And lighting guy for years, like decades. And I said, hey, I want to do lighting. I did some lighting in high school. Let me, show me how to do it. He said, show up to Richards on Richards tomorrow night. I'll pay you $100. I'll show you how to use the lighting board. So I did, and he paid me $100 and cut up giant lines of cocaine under the lighting board. And he would be like, I left you something in the booth. And I learned how to fold a flap, and I would put it in the, cause way too much. I was like, this is not what I want. I just drink alcohol. I don't want any of this. Put it in a little flap, put it in my pocket, keep it for later. But I basically started working at that club and another club, doing lights, covering lights for him here and there. Just super easy, analog lighting boards, like Leprechauns, if any LDs out there, but these old LEP 12s or LEP 24s, you could drop a bomb on them and they would still run, but
Yeah.
they are, they're nothing fancy. Um, and through that gig at Richards on Richards, I ended up meeting a guy who was doing sound there. And he'd be like, hey, you want more money? I need somebody to help me move some gear between these clubs and these clubs and this club and this club. And I just, $100 here, $200 there, just humping gear. One day, a band came into town, and the sound guy was in the sound booth. I'm in the lighting booth. We're sharing a booth. And he's like, well, why don't you what are you doing later? Come with us. So I just ended up hopping in a bus and heading down to Texas, grabbed my passport. There we go. And that's how I got the majority of my jobs, to be honest. Right, just in a club. Hey, you want to come with us? And so that's how I got my very first tour. I was tour assisting with this band, Trail of Dead, not really officially on their roster. I was just a girl, and they were able to get me through the border. Oh, she's just a girlfriend, she's not working,
Yeah.
which is how I got through the borders quite a bit. But yeah, so I did that for a little while. Ended up coming back doing more gig work, and then nothing was really a real tour um, until I got this tour with Cold. Actually, the same sound guy from Trail of Dead was doing a tour with this band called Cold, and I got that one because he just called me up. He's like, "Hey, we need a merch girl, tour assistant. You wanna do the job?" And it's like, "Sure." So, but there was a couple other smaller gigs in between there. I went out with a Canadian band. My Darkest Days, same kind of thing happened. I actually worked on their music video the day before. I was working as a tech on their music video the day before. Then they did a show up in Whistler with my sound company that I was working for. And then they were just like, "Hey, we could use your help. What are you doing next?" And so I ended up just riding around in a bandwagon with those guys for a couple months. And then I took a bus home. It was just done. Took a bus home, waited for the next call.
Were you always the only female?
Yes, I was always the only female. And this was about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I did my first national tour, I think in 93, I think, with as a crew person. I'd been doing, little hardcore tours before that with my own band. But I think it was probably I was 7 or 8 years into my touring career before I was on a crew with a female. And I remember that it's almost embarrassing to say this now, but I was like shocked. I was like, oh wow. Wow. And like how uncomfortable it made me. And like that really, at the time, looking at it, I've always considered myself a pretty progressive guy, but we all come from where we come from, and
Yeah.
even though like, I don't know, I wasn't going to get into this part till later, but here we are, even though I was raised, I'm a child of divorce. My parents divorced when I was 7, and I moved across the country with my mom and my little sister because my mom wanted to be close to where her mom lived down here in Louisiana. And so I was raised by my mom and my grandma and with my sister. I was, raised by women. I saw my dad for a couple months in the summer, but just where I grew up and, the people I grew up around, we have so many built-in, norms that we accept. And if you're not exposed to anything else, you never, So in the same way that at least I will say that for me, starting to tour, at first, even with my band, just getting out of where I was from and seeing other parts, first just of the U.S. and then Canada, and then very quickly after that, when I started working as a tech internationally, going to Europe multiple times, everything changed for me. An education happened that was so much bigger than all the years sitting in school. And part of that was realizing how close-minded I was about a lot of things, And part of that was how uncomfortable I was the first time I had had a female sleeping in the bunk across from me on the bus. So from your point of view, what was your experience being the only female? Because I know, especially 15 years ago, and with some of the bands you were with, that it was likely not awesome at times.
It was pretty not awesome a lot of the time. I gotta say, there's a certain genre of music that attracts a certain kind of man, and those men are not super open to having women. You know, we have to remember too that back then social media wasn't the kind of thing it is right now. And when guys of that ilk went on tour, it was like a free for all because there was no like accountability. There was no cell phones that could take really usable pictures at the time. There was no like social media wasn't quite what it is now. So I remember being on tour with a guy and he said like social media killed the groupie. And he was disappointed that social media killed the groupie because it didn't allow him to be debaucherous and, do whatever he wanted to do without any accountability. So having a female on the road kind of reminded a lot of the guys that I was out with that they had wives, girlfriends back home, or it made them think that they had to behave better, like I was going to judge them because I was a female. And I think, I don't know, it's just like this old, like the old, verbiage or proverb or whatever of like, you never have a woman on a ship, right? You don't have a woman on a ship is bad luck. It's like, don't have a woman on tour. It's bad luck. And I had I had a band member's wife, 7 months pregnant, come out on tour because she was worried I was going to sleep with her husband. And first of all, he was a drummer. Second of all, I was not there to sleep with anyone's husband. I was not there to sleep with anyone. And I made it very, very clear. I had to, like, as a crew member, when we had our days off, we could do whatever we wanted to do. I purposely would not hook up with anybody, whether they were on the crew, whether they were someone that I knew from like years ago and I just happened to be in the same town as them. I purposely was like a nun, like celibate for my entire touring career until I got with this punk rock band who was super badass, super feminist, and were like, Juice, we love you as you, and like, why don't you go say that guy likes you? Go say hi to that guy. And I'd be like, no, I can't. Like, I had it so ingrained in me. Like, you cannot. You're here to work. You cannot even look at another human being, because then you will be proving to them everything they think is true. Even if you just like flirt with a guy, everything that they think is true about you, you'll be proving to them is correct.
That is, it is so stark in contrast to the experience that every male lived with while you were there.
Yeah.
A completely different, point of view you're coming from. There's the saying, and I may screw this up, but the biggest thing that a male has to worry about is the female laughing at him. And the biggest thing that the female has to worry about is the guy harming her. And, that's a reality. And for me, it took, just there were little things that happened along the way. But when I was 27 years old, I had my first child, my oldest daughter, and then had another one 5 years later. So I was a girl dad. And then that immediately shifts my focus about everything. So instead of, being apologetic about how closed my mind may have been early in my life, I, kind of focus on the fact that that was the beginning of my starting to see the system that, especially in our society and, in North America that we've lived in. I know it's the same much all over the world, but just understanding how shifted the things are, towards males, specifically, with the same skin color as me, but we won't get into that whole side of it as well. And then what is the benefit if you do look like me and you're a man, of not just letting things work in your favor? It's pretty hard to incentivize that when a lot of things have been set up. And I'm talking more when I got into the workforce 35 years ago. There's been a lot of progress made, obviously not enough. Anyway, to move on, were you still working in between tours or in between, doing rock and roll stuff? Were you still doing days as a PA, building up your days at this point?
Yeah, anytime I was home, I was, working as a PA and I think as a third AD, which is something you guys don't have, but it's the person who runs base camp. So like your second, I guess.
Yep.
And they run base camp basically, which we call circus up here. So I was doing like third AD jobs and PA jobs. Mostly I think at that point mostly doing third AD stuff in between tours, and yeah, so it'd be on the road and then on a film gig and then on the road and then on a film gig. So I pretty much did them both in tandem, which is I think
Wow.
kind of rare.
Thinking back, I did have the guy who gave me my very first job in rock and roll when I was, 19 years old. A guy named Steve Joseph from New Orleans, and he tour managed and managed Crowbar back in the early '90s. And he had actually played drums in Razor White, which was Philip from Pantera's first band. And Steve J, literally, hey, you want to go with us? I can't promise you any money. We'll feed you. And that was my first tour in '93. And Steve, to make money, because we certainly weren't making much back then on those tours, he did catering. He was like a third catering cook and was doing, this was pre-tax incentive here, but there was still, usually 2 or 3 features a year in New Orleans area. So he would be like, I can't go these 3 months. I got it because that would bankroll him for the year. He's the only other person I knew that did both back to back. But real quick, just for anybody that's listening, because I haven't had any ADs or directors on, can you kind of explain the difference in, obviously the director and then first AD, second AD, and what you guys call a third?
Yeah, I like to put it in this. So you have your director, and then you have your first AD, who's like the right hand of the director. They when we're there's two parts of film. There's prep and there's production. In prep, they're just making the schedule. They're figuring out when we shoot what and where and when and how, what our times are going to be. They basically do a big Jenga puzzle of the entire schedule. And then on the day when we're actually in production, they are the person that keeps us on that schedule and gets us through that day. I like to call them the ghost of Christmas present. Um, and then you have the second AD, who's the ghost of Christmas future. They're the ones who are making the call sheet for the next day, going over the schedule, making any changes that needed to happen on the day. And they're all like, that's what I do now. And they are concerned about tomorrow. They are making sure everything is ready for tomorrow. And then the third AD, they are the person that's at base camp or circus or whatever, and they're at the trucks basically, where all the trailers are, and they're the ones knocking on the doors, getting people to and from hair, makeup, which I think in the States is a PA's job, but they also at the end of the day they make the production report, which is the list of basically everyone's in times, out times, what we did that day. And if an accountant looks at that form, they can that one production report, they can basically see how much money we spent and where and why. So they're basically the ghost of Christmas past. They're worried about the shit we already did. And together, and then in our world, we have a trainee AD who is like on set next to the first AD at all times. They're running to get cast. They're running to get coffee. They're helping set background. They're doing, all of that stuff. And the second AD jumps in and helps with that stuff too once they've got,
Yeah.
their paperwork done. I have a friend who helped train me, who's now passed away. He was a very difficult man sometimes, but he definitely toughened me up and made me the AD that I am today. And he always used to yell, AD means all departments, Juice, all departments. Like constantly, it has been drilled into my head. AD means all departments. You have to be focused on absolutely every department to make sure that they have what they need. And you can never trust. I have trust issues. You can never trust that props is going to have the prop unless you talk to them, look them straight in the eye, or see it with your own eyes.
What is as far as getting your membership? Did you have to get? I know here you have to get a certain amount of days as a PA. How many days did you have to get working as a PA?
I believe it's 150. You have to do like 30 or 90 to get a logbook, just as a helper PA, to get a logbook. And then you have to get, like, I think it's 100 days to become a member PA. And then after you're a member, you can work in any member position. So then you can upgrade to like trainee AD or third AD.
Really?
You're an associate member. So I think, yeah, you have to get like, they've changed the rules, I think. But I think back in the day, it was like you need to get 150 days in 300 days or something in order to become an associate member. And then, you can upgrade from associate member as well. It just means paying more dues, and you can
Yeah.
work in any member category.
When I started in 2006, 2007, I remember being just shocked at the amount of days the PAs had to have here to apply to the DGA. And I want to say it was like 1,000 or 1,200 days or 1,500 days, something ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I used to just think, man, how could that ever be a payoff?
Because DGA rates are like sometimes triple what DGC rates are. And
Oh, okay.
y'all, once you're in that union, like, and you move up, y'all get residuals. We don't get residuals. Y'all get producer credits. We don't, like, there's so many things that DGA people get that DGC people don't. And we do the exact same work, if not a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's actually really frustrating. But we love our DGA friends. Yeah.
So, where did the problems start coming in to jump back over to recovery? Where did problems start, and what did that progression look like as you were doing all of this, back and forth rock and roll and working on set?
I feel like the problems the problems were never on the road. I will give you that, because for me, I had to hold myself to a higher standard. This goes back to being a woman on the road. I had to hold myself to a higher standard in a way. You have to work twice as hard to prove to a man that you're half as good, and I couldn't be the party girl. I got picked up by a band from San Diego and LA. They were half from San Diego, half from LA, a punk band. And I finally felt comfortable to be myself and be a woman with them. And I think towards the end of that touring, because we toured together for like 5 or 6 years, on and off, Europe, Mexico, Russia, like all the US, all of Canada. And I think towards the end of that, I was drinking a little bit more on tour than I would have liked. But when I got home, that's when I could like let loose a little bit. And until I had a job, it was like find money in the couch cushions to be at the bar every day by 3. It was like a schedule, 3 o'clock at the bar. And when I had a job on a film set, it was, I work hard so I can play hard. I deserve this. I was working, a third AD at that time a third AD basically is in a little bit after the Jenny op, which is like the first person in. And they're out just before the Jenny op. Especially if it's a walkaway, the Jenny op's only in 18 minutes before the third AD and only leaves 18 minutes after. So you're working, 18 hours. I was working a show 22 hours in a day, and nobody saw an issue with that. And I would make sure that I would have a way to get alcohol at the end of the day. I'd be doing 6-hour turnarounds, and I'd be still drunk showing up the next morning,
Yeah.
It was how I coped. And towards the end of my drinking, I would be in the third AD trailer with a coffee cup, with a disposable coffee cup. I'd take the string off of a tea bag and I'd tape it to the lid of the coffee cup, and I would fill the coffee cup with alcohol, with like iced tea and vodka, because if somebody looked in, they wouldn't know, except that there's a tea bag taped to the lid of a coffee cup. But, and it started to be where I was drinking at work, especially when everyone had left base camp and it was just me and the costumer in in the costumes trailer, and she'd be doing it with me, And that's, I think I kept a very good lid on my outward expression of alcoholism. Like I wasn't slobbering, falling down drunk all the time, but I was an asshole in the morning to the teamsters and they were scared of me. Um, which is when you have like a bunch of big burly trucker dudes scared to talk to you in the morning, you're probably a fucking asshole. And it's because I was hungover every morning. And, I was putting my head down on my desk and like, or passing out in my chair with my hands on my keyboard, after I got my actors to set. And I imagine that I also smelled boozy. Like, I smell it on people now, but I bet, yeah, I smelled pretty fucking boozy. So those were like the problems outwardly, but like I hadn't lost my job over it. I hadn't crashed my car yet. I hadn't like had any of these big moments, these big like eye-opening moments. But I was liking myself less and less, and I was. It was an internal like I hate myself. I hate this. I hate me, but I can't not do this. And the problems, I think, primarily were internal problems, not external problems. Um, and just like the depth of anger that I was carrying around that I didn't actually know was anger. It just felt heavy. And only in hindsight can I realize how angry I was. And so, yeah, that was the problems. And that was mostly when I had come back off the road and I was kind of committing myself to being a third AD for a while, and being at home. Um, and then that's when I realized, like, I can't be home. Like, I can't be home permanently. I need to have another out to go out on the road somewhere. Like, I can't do it. And I think that's when the drinking really stepped up.
Yeah. I remember coming back to my room. I was in a treatment center, and in a in the middle of a state licensed mental institution that housed a treatment center. And I remember coming back to my room one night at the end of the night after all the groups and a meeting and whatever we had done, and having the realization, standing there brushing my teeth, that I somewhere in my raising I had all these values that were instilled, or I was just inherently born with, being, to be a good human. And it was very simple. I just saw this list of all the things you're not supposed to do. And at 17 years old, being in a locked unit in a treatment center, realizing how many of those I had already scratched off. And I had the clarity in that moment for the first time ever to think, I didn't decide to do all these things. Like, I didn't intend to do all of these things, yet here I am. And that was one of the absolute first little moments of thinking, maybe, just maybe, I have this thing, that I qualify to be taking up a seat in the meeting, or that I'm where I'm supposed to be in this locked unit in a hospital. So, yeah, you made me think of that one moment of clarity, which led to another, thankfully, and another, which led to now.
It's kind of funny because I have been surrounded by sober people my whole life, and never once did I think I was one of them. And like, until the last sober person to come into my life before recovery. But I literally was in a van with the guitar player. We were in, like, I left the bus tours. I got on these cool punk rock tours. They treated me really well. And the guy who drove all the time was this guy, Mike, our guitar player. And he would pull these things on me where he'd be like, in the morning in the hotel room, "Hey, Juice, can you read this? My eyes aren't ready yet." And it'd be his, like, just for today. And like, he kind of knew. He probably had an inkling before I did. And like, he was, at the time, I think he was 12 years clean off heroin, and was always on the phone with his sponsees, calling his sponsor, just doing the thing right next to me on purpose. And like that guy and I, like me and Mike are still very good friends, like very, very good friends. Because he was like one of the first people to like, for me to actually kind of clue in. Like when I started thinking about maybe getting sober, I texted him. I was like, "Hey, I think I might be an alcoholic." And he's like, "I don't know, are you?" And I was like, "I need you to tell me that I am."
Yeah.
And he wouldn't, but but like I've been really lucky that I've had those people around me, and I always admired them and saw them as these like really kind, wonderful human beings for the most part. But I never was like, yeah, that's me. I wanted what they had, but I was like, but I don't drink enough for that to be a thing. And then I ended up doubting my alcoholism after a while, being like, am I just pretending to be an alcoholic so I can be one of these people? But when I look back on all my shit and all my stories, I'm like, oh, no, no, no. No, you are an alcoholic and an addict. You belong here. Like you were just trying to talk yourself out of recovery.
Yeah. Well, I always love hearing stories, especially of people in the, touring world where, somebody gets it or at least has that example of a person being actively living an
Hmm.
attractive, recovery program on the road, because the whole thing is built on just that attraction, not promotion. And, in hindsight, looking at the 15 years I spent out there, I wasn't always the best example. You get away from your program a lot when you're long time without me. You can't always make meetings when you're doing 6 shows a week and working, 16 hours a day. But I know in hindsight that I was that person, and I love hearing that anytime. So shout out to Mike. I don't even know you, but good on you. That's fantastic. So that was the first person? What did your bottom end up looking like?
My bottom was in October of 2018, September, October 2018. I was working on a TV show. I was a third AD. It was probably my last full third AD job. I was ready to move up. Um, but something had been holding me back. I wonder what it could be. Um, and there was a cute guy. It was one of the actors on our show. And I made friends with him and was like, why don't you come to a soccer game? Why don't you do this? And he's like, Juice, I don't drink alcohol, so there's not really a whole lot for me to do at a soccer game. I don't really like watching soccer. I was like, oh, well, that sucks. You're not a lot of fun. He's like, I'm tons of fun. And so throughout the show, as the third AD and he was the actor, we interacted quite a bit. And he kind of was just living this cool, sober life. And I was going to the bar after work. These are more regular hours. I was probably only working 15 hours, 16 hours a day, regular hours. So I would make it to the bar before it closed. I would speed home and park my car in front of the bar when I lived 2 blocks away from the bar so that I could, get as many drinks in as possible and then drive my car 2 blocks home. Um, and I did that kind of on the regular for a little while there. Um, it was it was pretty consistent and pretty, sketchy. And then one morning, it was a Monday morning. So the bar that I went to always had $3 shots of Jameson's and $3 cans of PBR. So I would go there on Sundays and just get fucked up. And then Monday morning would come around and I had to go to work. Usually I would get through the rest of the Sunday with a little bit of cocaine and all this other stuff. And so Monday morning came around. I had a call time of 4 a.m. and I got in my car and I drove over a traffic circle in my neighborhood, blew out both my back tires, nursed my car back to a parking lot, and called the transport coordinator. And he came and picked me up and swung me through the McDonald's drive-thru for a coffee. And I thought he was just being nice. Turns out he was trying to sober me up, and
Yeah.
that scared the shit out of me. That scared the living shit out of me. Um, and I think that was my bottom. I went on drinking for 2 more weeks, 3 more weeks. I had zero consequences. When I was ready to get off work that day, my car was in the parking lot at Crew Park, with 2 brand new tires on it. And
Shout out Teamsters.
yeah, shout out Teamsters, man. But also, holy fuck, I'm so lucky. I am so lucky.
Yeah.
I didn't, my bottom was a soft bottom, you know? But it, on the outside, internally, it was terrible. And I went 90 days dry without a program, just dry. And
Yeah.
I think that was the hardest part, was just not having my medicine and not having a solution and being in limbo and wanting to just like scratch my skin off, and just that I think would probably, that's the internal bottom coming, you know, coming out, like not having the medicine but not having the solution. And I think that was probably the worst part of my entire recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got active in recovery after that 90 days.
Yeah, so I stopped drinking October 29th, 2018, which is a day after my birthday. And then I didn't go to a meeting until early February. And
But what was your experience like just jumping right on board when you got there? Like you had found
it was
home
like
or
having oxygen for the first
yeah.
time in 90 days. It was, I, so I ended up dating that guy that was cute on the show that I was working on. Kind of a no-no. You don't really do that, but shit happens. And you know what? I stayed sober with him. You know, I was sober for him. I'm sober because you're sober, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable with, you
Yeah.
know, by drinking around you. And he introduced me once to somebody as, oh well, Juice doesn't drink, but not she's not one of us, and it made me mad. I got mad. I was like, "How do you know I'm not one of you?" And he goes, "I don't know. Are you?" I'm like, "I don't know. Am I?"
Mm.
And then I was like, "Okay." So he ended up moving. Like the show ended, and he ended up moving back home to where he lived. And the day before he moved home, he was like, "Come to this meeting with me." Took me to a meeting, and basically was like, "She's yours now. You take care of her. Like, I've done what I can. She's
Yeah.
yours now." And yeah, there was a girl who was literally telling my story. Like, she's talking about reading a big book on her own. And she's like, "Who does that?" And I was like, "I did that. I was doing that in the AD trailer like 2 weeks ago. Like, trying to read a big book and understand it on my own.
I don't need
Starting
any
with,
help.
yeah, like, I can
I
do
don't need
this on
help.
my own, you know? And I don't need AA. I just need to not want to drink anymore. So if I read this book, everything will be fixed. And yeah, it was like oxygen. It was like, yeah, it was just, I had been starving and without my medicine, and I didn't have a solution. And just like walking into that room, it just, I could just breathe, and like, I felt safe. But I also wanted to be the best at it.
Of
And I
course.
wanted you to all think that I was been there forever and that I was really good at it. And y'all all saw through that. You definitely saw through that.
So work you just continued, you were still doing film at the time. Have you didn't tour anymore since
No, I haven't.
getting
I
sober?
haven't toured really since the last tour I did with Retox. They kind of, that band sort of disbanded, and I kind of started having to figure out how to live at home. You know, how to be alone with me,
Yeah.
and that was part of my recovery. Was learning how to be alone at home with me and be okay. And and you know, I would, for the right tour, the right people, the right destination, the right money, I for sure would go back out. I mean, I love it. It's a lot of fun and I'm really good at it, but a lot of my job that I do now is essentially the same. I just get to stay at home.
Well, and you and I are on different ends in both businesses, you know. But I think the same thing. I would love, you know, I romanticize it. I get euphoric recall about touring, just like I did about, you know, either drinking and using or toxic relationships, whatever. And you name it. I can unremember all the terrible stuff and just focus on the great stuff. And and I've got a friend, an artist, one of the guys that we used to work for, not specifically, but one of the on stage types, and I was talking to him last night. They were flying to Indonesia this morning to do a show, and I'm like, it's awesome. Oh, and he's like, no, it's not. I'm
No.
so over this. And just remembering, oh yeah, I would probably at 51 years old, if I was flying to Jakarta in the morning, would be really pissed about the 30 hours of flights I was about to do. So I know that I romanticize it quite a bit, and especially the touring model has changed now, and you know, belts are a lot tighter in the touring world than they used to be, and anyway, but
Well,
yeah,
I mean, I certainly don't want to get strip searched in Eastern Europe again. That's like, like, why do I keep thinking that this, like, I got to go to some amazing places, but also some of the shit that we put up with, like,
yeah,
yeah, like, that's probably, I'm good leaving that in the past. It's a great story, and we'll just
yeah.
leave it there, I don't need to repeat
Middle,
that.
all border crossings always seem to happen in the middle of the night. You know,
Middle in
right
the pissing rain.
in the yeah. I remember. I don't think I've told this story in here. I was with one of my first European tours, and this was before the EU, which kind of dates me. But you used to, I mean, on a European tour, you might cross a border every night or every other night, show to
Twice a
show.
night.
Yeah, some nights exactly twice a night. And we were coming from somewhere, I think from Switzerland into France, and I just remember being woken up, and we had all given our tour manager had all our passports, so hopefully we didn't even have to get out of our bunks. And bunk flies open. There's a machine gun in my face with the flashlight off the bus, and they're doing it to everybody. They don't get us all. We're like, can we put shoes on? No, we're trying to stop and get shoes on. It was snowing sideways. We're in the Alps, and we're outside in the snow, all standing there shivering while they toss our entire bus. Like, dump everybody's bags in the hallway, pull all the mattresses out. They just destroyed the bus. And then it took like 15, 20 minutes, and then they come out, dogs and everything. I remember one of the dogs pissed in the front lounge, and they all come off, and they're like, okay, you can go. Well, now it took us hours to put everything back together. It was, yeah, the glamour and the glory.
Yeah.
You
Ours
know,
was like a pre-Schengen border. It was a border that hadn't been a part of the open border system of the EU.
yeah,
So it was like um, they were just about to join the open border system, Schengen, and so all the border guards were about to lose their jobs. So and we had Czech plates. Our plates were from the Czech Republic, so
yeah,
they were just like, "Yep, got it." Like they were just tossed the bus or tossed the van. It was a van at the time. Tossed everything of everyone's. Like made me put my hand in my hair gel to make sure that it was hair gel. Like they put my hand in it. It was very strange. And then they strip searched us.
yeah.
And because it turned out our drummer actually had hash in his sock. Because
There's all, yeah,
why do you need to bring drugs across an international border when you're the drummer of a punk band?
yeah. Thanks, buddy.
And really, like hash, really?
At least pick something good.
I know, man.
So yeah, these are all. This will be a recurring set of stories throughout this podcast. Of this was not in the brochure. All this stuff was not in the brochure. You mentioned the other day or yesterday we were talking about doing this, and you mentioned being in a bus crash.
Oh yeah.
I love to hear about bus crashes. I was in a few little incidents. So
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple incidences. There was one where it was -40 in Wyoming. If anyone's driven in Wyoming in the winter, it is
not
like,
good.
it is not good. It is windy. It is cold. Fun
They
fact, minus 40 is where Celsius and Fahrenheit are the same because fucking cold is fucking cold no matter what, metric you're using. That one was like the least, it was bad. We got rear-ended by a semi, that was going almost full speed, even though we were in a whiteout. And, trailer went into hitch went into engine. We all got tossed from our bunks. Basically had to do a bus swap at 4 a.m. at a truck stop where I don't think they had ever seen a woman. And I think they probably had about 3 teeth between them. It was like pretty sketchy. But the worst one, the worst bus crash was we were in Idaho, very similar to Wyoming.
Yeah.
But there was it had snowed just a little bit, and we were in a bandwagon. Now, I don't know if you know what a bandwagon is, but for those of you who
Yeah.
don't know, it is like a cross between an RV and a 5-ton box truck. Like it is, they've basically taken the outside of a truck and on the inside made it look like a bus, but it is pretty top heavy. It's still a truck, drives like a truck, still usually like a Kenworth, front to it. And at the time, I don't think you actually needed a CDL to drive one. I don't know if you do now, but you didn't.
It's not a full CDL. At least in the States, I think you have to have a lower class of CDL to drive it,
Yeah.
like a
Well,
people mover license.
the Canadian boys on the tour that I was on didn't have. I don't know if they needed a or had the proper licensing. Anyway, they took a corner too fast, and there was just a little bit of snow, and the whole thing just went and just fully like fell sideways into a ditch. I was thrown from my bunk, and I hit the like retaining wall that goes down to the stairs to leave the bus, like where the staircase is, and just I bruised my kidney, I bruised my liver, and I was black and blue all across the back of my body, and the bus was like pretty much upside down. Um, the uh, the drummer, again, the drummer was hit with a bout of nervous farting, and it was him and I that were stuck in the bus, and it was just nervous farts, just like panic farting the whole, and it was,
Oh,
and I'm like, what the is actually happening here? Like, where am I? What is happening? Why are you farting? And they got everybody out, and we're about to right the bus, and they remembered that I was inside still. Like they had forgotten that I was in there because
thanks,
the
guys.
guys the guys were all like, "Oh yeah, no, we got everybody." And they're like, "Oh right. Wait, we had this girl with us. She was selling merch for us and saving our ass and being our like therapist and nurse, like, all these things."
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and
Uh,
we all went to the hospital and all got checked out, and it was fine. It was fine, but it was not an experience I'd like to repeat.
yeah.
So I'm glad I'm off the road before bus crash number 3.
Yeah. I had
Yeah.
a guy I toured with for a long time. Hope to have him on one day. His name's Frank Scambolone, and him and I talked about co-authoring a book when I was still out there, full time touring. And the book we had our title. That was it. We never made it past the title, but the title was going to be "My Bed Goes 80 Miles an Hour," and because that's people. I think glaze over that fact that you sleep the majority of your nights flying down the interstate. It's amazing how accustomed you can get to doing that, stacked like cordwood in the hallway of a bus. In tiny little coffin-sized bunks. There was a time, I won't even say what band it was, but there was an incident with a bus and a trailer where something was broken, and for one show, we were going from somewhere in Ohio to someplace else in Ohio overnight in between gigs, and they rented a 10-ton box truck, like a big Penske truck or whatever. So we had to cross load all the stuff into it. And essentially, they drew names. Like two of us were going to have to go take the box truck after the gig that night, drive to the next gig, and load in. And the other guy was driving, and we were driving along, and I came to because he was screaming, and we were in the median of the interstate going 65 miles an hour, and there was one of the little police turnarounds. Thankfully, it wasn't like a super ramp. It was just enough that we hit it, and we full blown Dukes of Hazard in the middle of the interstate at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And somehow, I still do not understand. We landed, and he was able to, had let his foot off the gas, glide back up onto the shoulder of the interstate. And we kept driving. We didn't even open the back and check anything until load in. And we never said a word to anybody. never, I think eventually we told a few of the other crew guys, never told the band, never said a word.
How was the gear in the truck?
Everything was okay. There was some stuff, obvious, everything that was loose on top was flown around. And, they were like, geez, you guys must have been flying to get here, when we opened up the truck to unload it the next day. But we were like, oh no, oh no. And I was a part of one in Europe where on a double-decker bus in the
Oh,
middle of the night going through a tunnel, and I had gotten up to go to the bathroom or something, so I wasn't completely back to sleep. And all of a sudden, you could hear all of these brakes and impacts, and you're in a tunnel, so it's echoing. And then wham, he locked up every brake on the bus, and we're all of us came flying out of our bunks on top of each other. And somehow this driver was able to stop. There had been a pileup in the middle of the tunnel, and he was able to stop before we hit it. But yeah, it's a crazy, it's a whole aspect of that world that it's amazing how normal it becomes, but how scary it is if you really think about
yeah, and until you're flying out of your bunk,
it. From a dead
like
sleep.
being project like thank God you're in a dead sleep though, because like I think I would have gotten way more hurt had I been awake because I would have
Yeah.
braced for impact. The fact that I was asleep and like kind of just ragdolled against it, I think probably saved me a little bit. It saved a lot of us. But
Yeah.
like, yeah, until you've been hurtled from your bunk in a dead sleep, just with your centrifugal force, just like physics lesson right there.
All right, let's reel this in. Get back to a little bit of. I want to go back to work now, like from 2018 till now. How different? How different does work look now than before?
Well, first off, the Teamsters aren't scared of me anymore. You can always kind of tell the one who hasn't worked with me in about 5.5 years because they're like they're very trepidatious. But yeah, I mean, not only has work like I was able to move up and become a second AD and establish myself as a second AD, and that happened kind of pretty much immediately, like within my first year of recovery. Um, but I like it more, like I like it more. I like, I'm a morning person again. So, getting up at those ungodly hours is easier for me. The night shoots are a little harder, but, it's fine. I'm a lot more regulated as a human being in
Yeah.
not only my sleep cycles, but like my emotional state. And um, I'm, I'm a lot more accountable. And that in my job, in our industry and in our world, being a person who says, I fucked up and I'm sorry, this is how I'm planning on fixing it. What do you think? That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen at all. And I was scared to be accountable. I would lie and I would go to bed. I would die with that lie. Like, I don't care. I will, ride that lie till the end of my life if it saves me from looking bad. But
Yeah.
those lies all get found out. And then you end up just looking like a liar. And so being accountable in my job, going to a production manager or a producer and saying, hey, I fucked up, but this is how I want to fix it, has actually like really helped my career, especially in an industry of such dishonesty.
Yeah.
and
I
I
was.
think,
Go
yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
no, and I think that like I don't know, it's nothing like tangible has changed. I don't think in my career, but I lead with kindness in a lot more instead of ego, like I find opportunities. Yeah, I get stressed out, but I find opportunities to lead with, yeah, with like more heart-led decisions, even
Yeah.
in the workplace where it's not really a heart-led place. And that makes me stand out for sure, but I get shit done. I like to say I cultivate a healthy fear, a healthy fear. You can come to me with shit, but don't come to me with bullshit,
Yeah.
you know?
In the position of AD, there needs to be some element, at least a slight element of fear is very beneficial.
Yeah, instead of like being scared of me for like terrified of me just for existing like the Teamsters used to be, it's cultivating that like I said, the healthy fear. It's a good like boundary, I guess, to
Yeah.
have, come to me, but don't,
Yeah.
don't take up don't waste my time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that, essentially what we're talking about is the whole idea of practicing principles, the good principles in all your affairs. And the whole overall dynamic of the way that a lot of things work in the film business can be very toxic and can be very unrealistic. The lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. Well, in our business, it does every day. Lack of
Yeah.
planning leads to emergencies constantly and simultaneous emergencies across all departments.
Yeah.
And the ability to bring in, at least for me, that it allows me to have some sanity in the middle of that. And to be honest, and just like you were talking about, go, hey, slow down. This is what happened. This is what now I understand what happened. I did this wrong. How do we fix this? What's the quickest solution? I remember in my touring, because I got sober before I ever went on tour, and I excelled. Like people were, oh, you're great. Well, I was a mediocre recovery guy. Just being mediocre, you know, it gave me the tools to be pretty good at whatever I took on. And I think that's true for any of us. Oftentimes, I know for me, it gave me tools I wasn't born with, that I didn't get my tool bag out of the gate, that work anywhere in any situation. So today in your work, so if there's anything you could change about it, what do you think it would be?
Oh,
It's a big question, and there are many things for anyone, but you
there
know,
are many things. I don't know, man. There's a lot that I think is wrong with our industry, and there's a lot that I love about our industry that an outsider might think is wrong with our industry. You know, my partner's not in the film industry and he doesn't understand half the shit that he's like, why is it like this? But I think in my position, there's a lot of unpaid work. There's a lot of unpaid work that happens, right? And I'm expected to be on call constantly. And when this industry started, we didn't have cell phones in our pockets. It wasn't, you had a pager maybe or whatever, but like I get phone calls on weekends, on long weekends when I'm on a show. I get interrupted at dinner. I get like constant expectation of me to be available to everybody at all times on a weekend, especially actors. And I don't get compensated for it. And when in Canada, AD rates are not great. They're not DGA rates. And when I'm working, 75 hours a week minimum, and then on the weekends I'm not getting paid, but I'm still doing work. I'm still answering my phone. I'm still calling my actors on Sunday to remind them to go to work in the morning. Like, hey, don't forget your call time is this time, just confirming. Like, what other industry in the world do we have that somebody's job is to remind you to come to work in the morning? And if I don't do that and you don't show up, I get in shit. So I think in a very specific way, I think that I would love to have like what is the threshold of work, that gets compensated? Like if I'm on a show, I should be on retainer because I basically have to work every day,
yeah,
even just a little bit. And some days are harder than others, but I should be making money on the days that I have to pick up my phone and deal with work related shit. And I think it's a bit exploitive. I think the thing it's just it comes down to like this industry is exploitive. It's how much we can get for how little money from absolutely everybody. And instead of like how much is this person is worth this much because they bring this to the table.
yeah.
And I think changing that attitude would make a huge difference.
So I asked you this about, what it was like being on tour as the only female. And I want to ask the same of what it's like to be on set. And currently, there has been, I think, some improvement in society, in the last 15, 20 years. But I wanted to kind of tell on myself with the story. And this is just because, we all have blind spots. And I think it was probably 11, 12 years ago. I was on a feature. I'm not going to say which one, but I was working as a set electrician, and I had something happen one morning intentionality is irrelevant because it certainly was not my intention. Like I said, I already had daughters at this point, and would consider myself incredibly sensitive. But there was a female on the show. There were quite a few females on the show, but this one in particular, it was before call time. I think we were working a split. It was like, maybe 11 in the morning. And I had already been to catering, had breakfast. We were beat up. It was a long show, lots of hours. And, just tired. And I had already made my way in. We were shooting on a location, but we were there for like 2 weeks. So we had entrenched our staging area, and it was right next to Crafty. It was like the main area inside this building in downtown New Orleans. And I was sitting there. I was the only person sitting in this room, and there was a female on the crew that walked through multiple times. She was obviously having a pretty rough morning. And I didn't know what it was about. I didn't ask. And she came through one of the times, and it looked like she was a little bit lighter, but she was still, upset. And I looked at her with no forethought, and, I'm on my phone or whatever, not really paying attention. And I just said, let's say her name's Lisa for the sake of this. I just said, smile, Lisa, it'll get better. Not thinking anything about it. And about 5 minutes later on walkie, one of our guys on my channel was like, what did you say to her? And I was like, all the blood drained out of my face. I'm like, oh, what do you mean? It had never occurred to me how that might make a female in the workplace feel. It was not my intention, and I won't say any more than that because it doesn't matter. But I think anyone in any business or just walking around in your life, we can all benefit from thinking of others more. And we are all, at least for me, I'll speak for me, I get so tied into living the little movie of my world with everybody in the roles that they have been cast in my movie that I don't take it. That was a blind spot that I didn't know I had. And I attempted to kind of make amends for that at one point later in that show. It was not welcomed, and I backed away, and I've since been on one or two other shows with her and never even made eye contact with her again because it was not welcomed. It changed my perception. It opened my eyes a little bit more to everybody is in a different reality. Everybody has had a different life experience, which has made them who they are in this moment, today, walking around. And everybody's dealing with different things. And when I can approach things just from a place of kindness and acceptance, I find a lot more connection in my life. Everything works better. So for me, that was one experience I had, which, if you'd have asked me that morning, 5 minutes before I said that, I would have told you that I was, I never would have placed myself in a category that would have said something that upsetting to a female on set, but I did. So anyway, I'll shut up. How is it today? Is it better? What is your experience like?
I would say today it is better. It's better than it was when I started, almost 20 years ago. Like I'm 36 now. I started when I was 17. So I have seen the gamut of, what it was like and what it's like now. And it is better. Um, I had an experience where something happened to me on set, and I told a woman that I trusted on set that it happened, and they told me to keep my mouth shut if I ever wanted to work in the industry again. And this was several years ago when I was still PAing and trying to be a grip, and my key grip, pulled some shit on me, and keep your mouth shut if you ever want to work in the industry again. And that doesn't exist anymore. If you, which is amazing, it is a godsend. I find that we say a lot of things. This is a no bullying, no harassment policy in our, at every production meeting, we have no bullying, no harassment, zero tolerance for bullying and harassment. Come to the first AD if you or your department head, if you see something, there's a hotline for you to call. But I find that a lot of that is just, it's just words to say to make everyone feel better. Personally, as a woman on set who's experienced some, assault and violence and all kinds of things in the workplace, I make it known that I am a person to come to when, if you don't know what to do about a situation, if you don't want to carry it alone, because these things are still happening. People are still making comments. People are still doing, having those jokes. I think for a long time it was a free for all. It was just, like people could make sexist jokes all the time, and it was mostly men around, so nobody got offended. And the women who were around, we just learned how to swallow it and how to like suck it up and be like, ha ha ha, because we choose the battles we want to fight. Like, is this the hill I want to die on today? If I put up a fight about this, am I going to get called for the next job? That is literally the thought process. But it's not allowed anymore, which is great. That is a big change I've seen. I can go up to someone and say, "Hey man, that's not cool. Don't say shit like that." Or, "Hey man, like, you want to talk to your buddy here? Like, you're laughing at his joke, and you and I are friends, and he's making fun of me." Like, so there is a place for that now. I still think there's a bit of an issue with progression in the industry as a woman, and I 100% have a leg up being a white woman, because there's not enough people of color working in our industry. There's not enough Indigenous people working in our industry. And I think that definitely needs to change. Now that it's a safe place for women to be, it needs to be a safe place for people of color to be. And for like, LGBTQ plus people, trans people to be able to work in our industry without being, nervous or scared of being, comments being made, or people, committing hate crimes or hate speech. So I think the women's battle is getting better. There's still so much patriarchy, like little microaggressions. Like, there's kids on set, so the female AD takes care of them, There's a dog on set, female AD takes care of them. If you're the only female on being the only female on my AD teams for a long time, I often get tasked with traditionally female roles, like dealing with children, or, one of my first ADs sent me out to buy flowers for his girlfriend. Would he have done that if I was a guy? I don't think so. So there are like, there's those microaggressions still exist on a daily basis. And even when it comes down to me, giving direction to somebody, a crew member specifically, giving direction to somebody and being direct and straightforward, or holding their feet to the flame. "Hey man, you said you were going to have this piece of set deck here. It is not here. We're doing inserts. Like, I need this today, and it's not here. What happened?" I'm accused of bullying and being a bitch. And, if you were to do the same thing, it'd be different. If you said the exact same tone, the exact same intonation, exact same words, it wouldn't be construed that way. So I actually was sent to HR for saying those exact words, to a male set decorator who didn't have the thing 2 days in a row. It was our last day of insert unit. and he called me a bully, and he actually was like accused me of bullying. And I had witnesses, and they were like, no. But like that stuff is stuff that consistently is still happening. But there is there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I think right now it's a bit tricky. We had a lot of progress with the Me Too movement. We had a lot of progress bringing those sorts of things to light for the people in front of the camera. And I still don't think it's a safe place, really, for those of us who've had those sorts of incidences happen. And it's a lot of us. Those of us who work behind the camera, I don't think it's still, it's not super safe for us to call those people out by name and hold them accountable for the crew members. And I've worked on shows where things have happened to me and to other people by, department heads and higher, and we're still not allowed to call them out and make a deal about it and make a fuss about it. So that also, I think, it needs to change. If we're catching it in the moment, if we're catching somebody being shitty in the moment, we're allowed to say something. But if we're talking about things that have already happened, or like big wig people who are pulling shit, we still really don't have the safe place to do that. I can't say this producer did this thing and, be protected the way that the people in front of the camera were able to do with the Me Too movement. So
I see it, the progress from my point of view. And again, this is from a guy that has just been trying to make that progress myself. But it is very much baby steps. It has been very incremental. But overall, I continue to see progress. And that's good, I guess. And for
it
any guys who are listening, in case you're not aware of why it was not cool for me to say, hey, just smile. What I learned from hearing the backlash immediately that morning was, would you say that to any guy that was walking by? What am I just supposed to smile and look pretty for you? And
mhm.
it never entered my mind. Again, the intention doesn't matter. What I really would have rather said was, it's going to get better, or whatever.
I think baby steps are really important, though. Like, it has to be
Absolutely.
baby steps, because if we pull a full pendulum swing right off the get-go, it's going to be, chaos.
Yeah.
And baby steps are important, but also I think there's two sides to that. I'm not letting you off the hook on the um, smiling comment, but the fact that it's been several years, they're like, for me, yes, it's offensive. It is very offensive to say that to a woman. I'm not here to look pretty for you. And if I'm in my shit right now,
Yeah.
you saying that to me is just going to set me off even
Totally
more.
out of line. Yeah.
But the fact that you have acknowledged it and recognized it and apologized for it, that means a lot to me. And I think it's really important that we reward the good behavior as well, instead of just like condemning one action. If someone can see the error of their ways and attempt to make a change for it, we need to applaud that, to continue to encourage people to make the changes in their lives,
Yeah.
and switch their perspectives and say, hey, you know what? Maybe the way I behaved was not great. I'm sorry. Thank you for saying that. I accept your apology. Don't do it again.
Yeah.
And I think without both people coming together, we're just going to create division. And I think it's really important to encourage the positive change in people in a world that's constantly changing. And, we, with pronouns and identities and all these things, it's really hard to keep up sometimes for people who aren't in the know. And I
Yeah.
think applauding the effort is a big part of encouraging the change in people who wouldn't necessarily normally change.
Well, that moment was significant to me. It was significant in me improving the father I am to girls, the husband I am to a wife, the coworker I am to other females. It was a learning experience for me. And, at the end of the day, I am a white, deep South Southern guy, that was raised where I am from where I'm from. And, as part of my recovery and everything, the idea of being open-minded and willing to change and being a better person in all the roles I am in my life, which obviously we all fall short all the time in different areas, but it has been a part of my growth to improve in this area. And that's why I wanted to have this discussion here, because there have been other places, whether it was podcast or whatever, a movie, a TV show, a conversation with somebody, that I have heard these other ideas that cracked that door open to me of, hey man, other people think, feel, and believe completely different than you and have a totally different experience of the exact same thing that you do. And that is just fine. And acknowledging that doesn't put you on one side of a political aisle or the other, or it doesn't, it simply means you're being a kind and courteous human being and giving other people the same space that you would like to have. So I appreciate you being willing to have that part of this conversation.
Of course.
What, as far as work-life balance, like what do you do outside of work to keep you sane? What do you
box.
balance? You what?
I hit things. I box. Yeah.
When did this start?
This actually started about a year ago. I was always a wrestler in high school, and my whole family is a family of black belts, including my eldest sister, she lives in Los Angeles. She's a comedian, and she's like known for her karate skills. And so my whole family are black belts except for me. And we grew up sparring in the kitchen. And so boxing is just like a really great outlet for me. I've always liked that kind of sport. So I don't get hit in the face, and I don't hit people in the face right now, but I do all the boxing training, and I hit a bag really hard, at least once a week for an hour. And it really, really helps just keep my mind, keep my mind sane, and just like physical exercise. And there's nothing greater than a boxing workout. Like it is your whole body. So
it is.
Yeah.
So as far as inspiration in life today, what gets you out of bed every day?
I'm going to be lame here, and I'm going to say, like, what gets me out of bed every day is gratitude that I am alive, that I am able to open my eyes and wake up in a comfy, warm place, with people I love and my dogs, and I'm grateful to, even be alive today after some of the shit I've been through. I need to remember that just the fact that I exist right now is a goddamn miracle, and that I'm grateful for that.
I have to ask this of anybody that works in film, of all the actors, actresses. I will not ask who your least favorite have been, but who are your favorites?
Oh man, I got a couple. I've absolutely loved Shirley MacLaine. Like, she is just a riot. She's amazing. She's funny. She's sassy. She's a little bananas in just the right amount. She's great. I had the opportunity to work on a movie with a bunch of SNL actors, with like Taran Killam and Bobby Moynihan and Arnold Schwarzenegger randomly. And that was the best summer of my life. Like, honestly, the best summer of my life, working on this film with all these guys. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple people that are going to get really mad if I don't say their names, but I don't really care. Those are who come to mind right away, like working with those guys. Yeah. And Ken Jeong. Ken Jeong is amazing. Yeah, he's just hilarious and super nice, super kind. Had a great time working with him as well.
Awesome. Well, I have to correct something from some of my earlier episodes. I've asked this question at the end of all of them. And my wife finally corrected me. I had the wrong kid. I have been crediting my older son, Patty, with asking this or saying this, and it's my younger son, Killian. We call him Killy. That, and he at like 2.5 years old, Lisette said or did something. Honestly, I think I had this part right. She was giving him a treat, and he lit up and said, that made my heart smile, Mom. And he will equally tell you on a regular basis, you're making my heart very sad if you're telling him something he doesn't want to hear. But what makes Juice's heart smile today?
Oh, there's a lot of things that make my heart smile, and they're all very simple things. Um, I got a text from a buddy who I work with telling me that he got 90 days sober. That makes my heart smile. A buddy who came up to me at work and was like, help me. And I showed him how to get to a meeting. And that's all I did.
Yeah.
You know, it's really just quite simple things like watching somebody get better. And just my dogs.
Yeah.
My dogs make my heart smile. And, just being here in this moment with you, being asked to do this, just being here right now. This is making my heart smile.
Awesome. Well, the whole reason I did this to begin with was just to show the connection that I've made with so many different people and types of people. And, kind of what we were talking about earlier with, becoming more aware of others in general. At least for me, my world can get incredibly small at times. And in fact, that's kind of my default, is to regress to that. And so what I've absolutely learned is that the more connected I am to others, the happier I am, the more comfortable in my skin I am. And the easier, it's like a snowball effect. The more I do it, the easier it is to do, and the fuller my life is. So I really appreciate you being willing to do this and taking the time to do it today. And
Of course, yeah.
I'm grateful that that you have come into my life, and I got to know you better today doing this. I hope everybody else enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, and it's amazing what that little squares turn into, huh?
Exactly.
Little tiny boxes,
Yep.
and then suddenly we have lifelong friendships, right?
Exactly. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Thank you,
Awesome.
Brent.
Thank you, Juice.